Welcome to Annette on America. This is Annette Bybee, single mom to 3 teenage girls, lawyer, college professor, and outraged right now. I have been waiting for a few days to talk about this story. The Transgender Visibility Day story. I remember a few days ago, before Easter, obviously, seeing an article about how Fairfax, Virginia was naming March 31st as Transgender Visibility Day, which was also Easter Sunday, and I thought, that's got to be a joke. That's not real. That's fake news. So I looked it up, and lo and behold, it was real. And I thought, you are kidding me. Are you that ridiculous that you're going to put that day on Easter? So then, a few days later, President Biden comes out and announces it for the country. And I thought, that's insane. So I posted it to Facebook and I said, hey, Democrats, I hope you don't forget this, that Biden basically hijacked Easter with Transgender Visibility Day. And I got a response from one lady who said, oh, this has been the case for 13 years. It's always been on March 31st. I'm like, whatever. I've never heard of it before. So obviously, it's never fallen on Easter before. If it has, it wasn't made huge and public because we didn't have this president in office. And so he decided to make a big deal about Transgender Visibility Day and doing it on Easter. So let's just talk about the fact that it's not just the fact that it's on Easter that makes this a big deal. There's a lot more to unpack. The understandable controversy regarding Joe Biden's smear of Easter Sunday was the timing of his Transgender Day of Visibility proclamation, which he released on Good Friday. But by itself, that misses the main point. What did Biden's proclamation actually say? It was 2 pages long and more than 630 words. The content of the proclamation is a good marker of what Biden's agenda is and what a second term would look like. So if you're on the fence right now about Biden, it's hard to believe any of my listeners would be on the fence. But if you are on the fence right now about who you're voting for, please keep listening. Because this is not just about Easter and this is not just about Transgender Visibility Day. It is clear that the purpose of the proclamation is not to provide aid and comfort to individuals, and particularly children, who are suffering from gender dysphoria. Its purpose is to increase, listen carefully, to increase the number of children who experience gender dysphoria by literally encouraging it. Okay, this is the same thing as schools encouraging pronoun usage. You almost can't do anything without seeing pronouns being asked for. I recently entered into a contract with an entity I won't name, and they asked me about my pronouns. I think I just skipped right past the question because no, not going there. Transgender individuals are not suffering from a biological disease. They are suffering from a mental disorder, even if so-called medical professionals refuse to admit it. And I've talked about this a lot. Name for me another mental disorder where it's fixed or attempted to be fixed physically instead of mentally. Name one. I can't think of one other than maybe plastic surgery. A lot of times that's the case, but it's widely known and discussed and admitted that people use plastic surgery sometimes to deal with mental issues. And guess what? When you get plastic surgery, they make you go through an evaluation first to see if it's a mental disorder. They don't do this with transgenderism. They encourage it. Okay. If a president issued a statement on World Schizophrenia Awareness Day, it would not begin by honoring the extraordinary courage of schizophrenics, nor would it declare that they help America thrive. That would make no sense. They are suffering from a disease. Let's say a president issues a proclamation that says, we should love children confused about their gender. One might wonder why that particular group of suffering people was being singled out. But you could do that in a paragraph or two, just like Biden's Easter statement. The reason Joe Biden took 2 pages for his Transgender Day proclamation is because he professed his total support for the ideological agenda of this fringe movement. He also expressed his disdain for anyone who disagrees with him. There was more language in the statement hating on parents and normalcy than there was loving on trans kids. For example, the President of the United States took a shot at parents who don't want their young children exposed to confusing ideas about choosing their gender and the rest of the LGBTQ agenda. That's most Americans. But Joe Biden claimed they were banning books. He said that laws protecting girls' sports and protecting children from mutilating surgeries were hateful, terrifying, and un-American. I guess we're deplorables. Biden again endorsed the misnamed Equality Act in this proclamation. This legislation seeks to elevate transgenderism as a protected civil rights class equal to race and religion. If a school didn't allow black athletes to play on an all-white team, there is a moral and legal consensus in America that such bigotry is wrong and the school would lose its federal funds. But in Biden's statement issued on Good Friday, he indicated that he would punish any school that refused to allow a 180-pound boy to play on the girls' basketball team and shower with the girls. In Biden's opinion, any school or community against that is in the throes of bigotry and no different from racists. That's what Joe Biden wanted us to celebrate on Easter. People, that's because this whole LGBTQ promotion, celebration is a religion in and of itself. And Biden just elevated it above Christianity. As noted above, Biden's proclamation pledged his loyalty to the extreme transgender agenda. It was a statement of support and encouragement. He declared to the trans community, "You are loved, you are heard, you are understood, you are America, and I have your back." Can you imagine Joe Biden saying that about MAGA Americans? There are about 80 million of them. No, he wouldn't. In fact, he'd call them semi-fascist. That's what he calls them. Would Biden say that about people who love Jesus and love America? They're being attacked left and right. They're being excoriated in the media and popular culture. They're being labeled a danger to the country. Elements of the federal government seem to think they are dangerous terrorists. Organizations that embrace Christian values are smeared as hate groups. Would Biden ever say about pre-born children, the most defenseless and voiceless victims in society today, "You are made in the image of God and are worthy of respect and dignity. My administration will protect you"? No, he would never say that. In fact, he just sent the vice president to an abortion center. By the way, doesn't that strike you as a little odd that he would call people who are trying to change their bodies and tell them that they are made in the image of God? If they really thought they were made in the image of God, would they try to change their gender? I don't think so. Can you imagine Joe Biden cautioning the progressive left that Americans who love our country and love God deserve to be treated with dignity and respect? Has he ever told American Christians, "You are America and I have your back"? That would be a great statement for him to make on July 4th when the people most likely to celebrate the day are followers of Jesus who love America. When Biden's proclamation went on at length about how transgender individuals are persecuted in America, his brief Easter statement did not have one word about the persecution of Christians taking place all over the world. At best, it could only be inferred. Christians are the most persecuted people in the world, not transgender people. From communist China to Nigeria, Pakistan to Nicaragua, Christians who went to Easter services on Sunday knew it could be the last thing they and their families ever did. And the President of the United States did not say one word indicating that he was hoping and praying persecuted Christians would be able to worship in safety. Attacks on churches in America are at record highs. There was not one word by the president this weekend calling on people, his voters, to stop attacking churches and synagogues. It's impossible to take every refugee in the world. Although Biden seems intent on testing the idea, under Trump, the State Department prioritized persecuted Christians in refugee and asylum programs. In stark contrast, Biden prioritized LGBTQ refugees. If any illegal alien tells a Border Patrol agent they are a persecuted LGBTQ individual, that's a free ticket into America. By the way, we're going to be talking border in the next half when I talk to Mike Termott, the Libertarian presidential candidate, so don't miss that. The Biden White House is a sophisticated operation, and his campaign has incredible amounts of data. That proclamation with all those attacks on conservatives and normalcy was blasted out to the LGBT community, young voters, secularists, and those who don't identify with any religion. Biden's Easter statement telling transgender people they were made in the image of God was sent to woke churches. As this effort is being made to demonize normal Christian views, they are trying to replace those views with the leftist neo-Marxist agenda. They want you to believe that Jesus supports open borders. The vice president said there is no contradiction between the Christian faith and abortion. Biden uses God to advance radical gender ideology contrary to God's word and dangerous to young boys and girls. But, and I thought this was going to happen, the left's plans for Good Friday and Easter blew up in their faces, at least in part. There was enough controversy that people who weren't supposed to hear about the trans agenda heard it loud and clear. Now the White House is trying to clean it up. This does not help them with blacks and Hispanics. By the way, Democrats are in a lot of trouble with blacks and Hispanics right now. They can't afford to lose any more. So this was a big mistake on their part. A popular Hispanic radio host went ballistic and blasted Biden's transgender proclamation, saying, "This is an abuse, a lack of respect." Maybe that's why Biden denied doing it Monday and said Speaker Mike Johnson's criticism was thoroughly misinformed. Now, what are we supposed to believe? Does Biden really not remember doing it? Is his dementia that bad? Or did someone else release it without his knowledge? I assure you it's virtually impossible for a detailed policy statement to go out without the president's knowledge or is in any way contrary to the president's policies. In other words, even someone like Biden, who's pretty clueless about what's going on around him, is not going to have a statement like that released without his approval. This is part of the far left's radical agenda. So take note. Oh, but I just love the thumb that J.K. Rowling is sticking in the eye of those who are belonging to the cult of trans. So, Scottish police will not arrest author J.K. Rowling after she posted a series of tweets in which she was deliberately defiant of Scotland's, I can't believe Scotland is this stupid. I guess, anyway, new hate crime act. Not ironically, the act took effect on April Fool's Day and criminalizes misgendering an individual as being what it calls stirring up hatred. So basically, if my show was airing in Scotland and I'm in Scotland, maybe I would be arrested because I'm misgender. I'm not going to call a dude in a dress a she. I'm just not. Rowling not being arrested is great news, but the Edinburgh resident must feel as though she's stuck in her fictional world of dark magic and petty tyrants. As the BBC reports the kerfuffle, the Harry Potter author described several transgender women as men. No, she used pronouns that correspond with the individual's sex rather than their identity. In 11 posts, Rowling used her acerbic wit to mock the idea that various men are actually women, concluding, "I'm currently out of the country, but if what I've written here qualifies as an offense under the terms of the new act, I look forward to being arrested when I return to the birthplace of the Scottish Enlightenment." For good measure, she repeatedly used the hashtag #ArrestMe. And she's been doing this for years, and she's not giving in to the trans mafia. So, I'm kind of hoping that she does get arrested, because I would like to see the public outcry against a beloved author being arrested for calling a dude he. And that's my take on it. All right, the next big story. Oh, by the way, if you have missed any of the previous 125 episodes of Annette on America, go to AnnetteTalks.com, Rumble, YouTube, or any podcast provider and catch up. And if you are looking to advertise on this show, if you want to be a sponsor, better get in. I'm getting ready to sign one up right now. So if you have a great business or product that you would like to promote on my show, shoot me an email at Annette@AnnetteTalks.com. Or if you have any comments and you want to, give me a piece of your mind, shoot me an email, Annette@AnnetteTalks.com. All right, one of the big problems we've been having recently is squatters. Last month, New York City homeowner Adele Andaloro was arrested after changing the locks on a house that had been seized by squatters. She was the homeowner and she was arrested, not the squatters. Seems a little backwards, doesn't it? According to the New York Post, Andaloro was charged with unlawful eviction because she had changed the locks and hadn't provided a new key to the residence. The residents, however, are squatters. Fortunately, Andaloro's arrest was filmed and went viral, reviving an ongoing debate over squatters' rights, which is in parentheses here, or quotation marks here, because how can they be rights, right? Under which trespassers can take over an unoccupied house or piece of land and attempt to establish legal ownership. Not long after the Andaloro video surfaced, an immigrant TikToker with 500,000 followers posted a video encouraging other migrants to squat in private residences in the United States. The immigrant, Leonel Moreno, explained to potential squatters that under the U.S. law, if a house is not inhabited, we can seize it. So that's the mentality that a lot of these illegals have, and they're spreading it. And this particular guy was recently arrested, I think on a guns charge. But you don't think it's going to take that long for the word to spread, do you? I think we're just at the starting point on the squatting problem with the illegal aliens here. This is a perfect storm. In New York, you have gangs selling Social Security cards, Social Security numbers, could be yours, could be mine, driver's licenses, green cards, and we have a lot of people working illegally, and they need a place to live. And so if they can't afford one, guess what? Just go find an empty one. These videos have fueled increasing concern among property owners who have witnessed the explosion in the numbers of aggressive homeless residents in both central cities and suburbs. This, coupled with millions of new foreign nationals flooding into U.S. cities in recent years, has further increased concerns about a sizable, rootless, and impoverished population searching for opportunities to seize unoccupied homes. These recent examples have prompted many Americans to wonder why squatters' rights exist at all. Historically, there have been some arguably reasonable justifications for the practice, such as in times past when real estate records were far less precise and well preserved. In modern times, however, squatters' rights have little purpose beyond redistributing property to favored interest groups. In other words, socialism. So, what's the point to all this? The point is, squatters' rights are being exploited by illegals and others in big cities who have stupid rules and stupid laws. There are states like Florida which are waking up and saying, no, not going to have it. So we need to have many, many more states, cities, counties, every layer of government here, craft laws that do away with squatters' rights. They have no place in a country that has property rights. And if we do not have property rights, we have nothing. But that's what the socialists want, right? That's what the World Economic Forum wants. You will own nothing and you will be happy. They don't want anyone to be able to own anything. They want the government to control it. So, in other words, we need to see more laws. All right. Moving on. There are a couple of one funny story in Colorado, and one that's mostly good news. But we have a lot of problems with illegals in Denver and in Colorado in general, but Denver, being our biggest city, they've got some of the biggest issues. So, we are a sanctuary city, right? So we are still welcoming all these illegals with open arms, right? No, this is funny. This is really funny. The headline is the best part. Denver's long-term strategy, in place for several months now, includes pleading for immigrants to leave. Please go. We love you. Go. We love you. Go away, please. It's like parents trying to get rid of their 30-year-old that's been living in the basement, right? Go. This is for both of our good. This is good for you. This is good for me. Just go. Their transportation to other destinations would be paid at taxpayers' expense, right? So Denver is telling the illegals, look, there are more opportunities elsewhere in the country, and we'll pay for you to go. Just go. I'm just picturing these parents trying to get this 30-year-old pride out of that basement. Look, we will give you a bus ticket to your grandma's house, or we will give you a plane ticket to your Uncle Joe's. Please go somewhere else, anywhere else. I just love it. As has been our practice for several months, encouraging onward travel to destinations where newcomers may have support networks or better opportunities will continue to be a critical part of our long-term strategy to ensure the greatest opportunity for success for both newcomers and the city of Denver. Fuja, spokesperson for Mayor Mike Johnston, told the Denver Gazette. I just think that's hilarious. Wasn't it our city and our state, wasn't it Governor Polis that was denigrating Texas and Florida governors for busing illegals to other places? And now Denver's doing it? This is what happens when reality meets boneheaded liberal socialist ideas. Bam! Oh, please go, please. We're not going to kick you out, but please, here's some money. Here's a bus ticket. Please go. Staying in Denver could mean that newcomers have more difficulty gaining self-sustainability due to the lack of resources, opportunities, Fuji said. In other words, this is just for your own good. This has nothing to do with us. This has nothing to do with the fact that we don't have enough money to house you and we don't want your crime. This is all for your good. New York gives you more. Chicago gives you more. This is Carrera, another dude. Let's see, who's this guy? It's a Denver official. Anyway, Denver Gazette's new partner, 9 News, Johnston's political director. Okay, Johnston's political director, Andre Carrera, was caught on tape telling immigrants who have arrived on bus on March 26th that Denver could not support them. The opportunities are over, he told them in Spanish. New York gives you more. Oh, I don't think New York wants to hear that. Chicago gives you more. Oh, those Chicago residents don't want them either. So I suggest you go there, where there is longer-term shelter. There are also more job opportunities there. So all the cities, all the states are saying, go somewhere else. We don't want you. I mean, things are better for you elsewhere. Go elsewhere. In his impassioned plea, Carrera asked new immigrant arrivals to consider alternate destinations like New York City or Chicago. We are not going to block you if you want to stay here, Carrera said. If you stay here, you are going to suffer even more, and I don't want to see this. It's not me. It's not you. It's me. It's not you. It's Denver. Just his parents telling their kid, it's not you. It's us. We're not the bad people. We just want to help you. Oh, I just think this is so funny. But some good news out of Colorado. We had a judge enter an injunction against Colorado in the 303 Creative case. I don't know if you guys remember Lori Smith, I think. Yes. So the U.S. Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, ruled in favor of Smith, who is a graphic designer who did not want to build wedding websites for gay couples. And so the Supreme Court said, you don't have to. And so finally she has an injunction against the state so that they cannot require her to build these same-sex marriage websites. So, the case doesn't go as far as we would like, but this is good news for her. All right. So, of course, I am almost out of time in this half, which always happens. I think I'll share like one more or two more good news headlines before I pause for a commercial, and then I will return with the Libertarian presidential candidate. You don't want to miss it. Okay, one headline, New York Post, from the New York Post, Trump tops Biden in 6 swing states ahead of 2024 election. All right. Another good one in Wisconsin. Wisconsin voters approve constitutional amendment banning Zuckerbucks. If you don't know what Zuckerbucks are, go find those. Oh, and Gen Zs are starting to take up trades and not going to college as much, which is good for us, good for everyone. Not going to go there. All right. And if you haven't checked out the Taiwan earthquake, bizarre, go look for the pictures and videos. It's bizarre. Anyway, I will be back with the Libertarian presidential candidate, so do not turn the dial. Welcome back to Annette on America. This is Annette Bybee. And in this second half, we have a very special guest. We have the Libertarian presidential candidate, Mike Termott. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Annette. It's a great joy to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. I had the Libertarian gubernatorial candidate on, last year, whenever it was before the last gubernatorial campaign. And it was a lot of fun. He was a lot of fun. And I think my audience has a lot of libertarian leanings. I like to call myself a conservative / libertarian because, in some areas I feel more conservative, in other areas libertarian. Yep. So, but I was just introduced to you recently. And so why don't you give us your 90-second elevator pitch on why we should vote for you, and then we'll go into a deep dive into a few of the issues.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm a professional economist who spent 25 years as such, and as a second career, I worked as a police officer on the road in Broward County in South Florida. So I spend a lot of time talking about economic issues like curbing the amount of money we allow our government to spend. I spend a lot of time talking about changing our monetary policy in a way to structurally get rid of inflation. I also spent a lot of time delivering a clean, crisp anti-war message. And having been a police officer, I spent a lot of time talking about how we need to make fundamental changes in how we manage police officers, police agencies, how we need to sunset the insanely counterproductive war on drugs and change our criminal justice system in a fairly fundamental way. So it's a collection of libertarian ideas that fit into my personal wheelhouse. And I believe more Americans than ever before are ready to hear that message.
I think you're right. I was, before I forget, I want to send people to your website. So they can either go to Mike Termott, which is TERMAAT.com, or goldnewdeal.org, because your platform is the Gold New Deal, right? As opposed to the...
That is exactly right. And goldnewdeal.org is easier to spell than MikeTermott.com. So it's got that going for it.
Yes, it does. Well, and it's interesting. I was looking at your platform. I'm just going to do the the 10 titles that I have here. And then I want to ask you some questions about what you see as the biggest problems, but I just had to go through them really quick because they're a lot of fun.
They are fun. If nothing else, they are a lot of fun. Go for it.
Well, if you could even get like 10% of what you want in this platform, we would be better off. So it's very aspirational, but if you could get even a small sliver, I think we would be much better off. But number one, empower decentralization of authority, which basically is taking the power back to the states. And
that's exactly right. Some of my friends tease me, wouldn't it be easier just to pass the 10th Amendment over again and say, this time we mean it?
Yeah,
which I think is also a very fun idea.
I like it too. Number two, preserve individual autonomy. And that one's pretty wide ranging as well. But the part that caught my interest was at the end where it talked about, no vaccinations being coerced is very timely. But also no coercion of censorship of any privately controlled mode of communication, which right now speaks to the way the White House has been censoring or leaning on big tech to censor.
You're exactly right. And of course, those two sub-issues overlap, don't they? Because it was regarding vaccines and the mandates thereof and the science behind the vaccines that the government had spent so much energy and time leaning on social media companies and other companies about. And so we learned the hard way that our government is not really interested in you hearing everything you might hear. They want you to hear what they want you to hear.
Yep. Propaganda, basically. Number three, one of my favorites, eliminate the IRS. I don't know many people that wouldn't get on board with that. Number four, limit federal expenditure, which the last line I really like, the federal government shall only fund federal initiatives at the federal level. And so no more marble cake. I don't know I teach American government, and we teach things as they should be and then as they really are. And so it's supposed to be like a layer cake, right? Where the city and the state and the federal government all stay in their own lane, in their own layer.
Right.
That's the way it's supposed to work, but over time
it's supposed to be a parfait, and it's more like a marble cake. I really like your analogy. Yeah, we've got a problem with agencies like Department of Education, for example, that tax us and then give us our money back at the local level with strings attached, which is really weird.
Yes. And so I like that. If we could go back to a layer cake and get away from this marble cake where the Fed is reaching, I should say the federal government. Whenever I say the Fed, everyone, talks about auditing the Fed, which we'll get to in a minute, but where the federal government reaches down into the state, either through coercion or through bribery. And so it'd be really nice to get back to those layers. Number five, end mandatory investment, which is really Social Security that we're talking about.
Social Security is the big one. I've also got a problem with the insurance agencies like, Medicare, which is a forced participation from folks as well. The whole idea of forcing young people into a scheme that we recognize, no one argues that this is, not a Ponzi scheme. It obviously is. But the idea of recruiting people in just because it's so badly designed that you have this huge overhang of old people and you need young people, like a vampire needs young blood, right, to keep the system going. It's not just creepy. On some level, it's evil. When you know that young people are going to get a crappy rate of return, if they get any rate of return at all, right?
Right.
Just to make the system go because it was badly designed and forcibly, by the way, worse than even tricking them. I think on some level, that's not just a math problem, Annette. That's a problem with ethics. That's some evil stuff.
Yes, it is. There's not an easy solution to that. We'll come back to that if we have time. Number six, also really love, end the Federal Reserve System. A lot of people can get on board with that as well. Number seven, allow phase out of public education. And I like the bottom line, especially public funding of higher education, including student loans, shall be eliminated. Gonna have to phase that one out too. A lot of people are hooked on that system. A lot of Republicans are actually talking about eliminating the Department of Education now. That's kind of become
Yes.
popular. So, maybe we'll get there.
And that
Um,
is important. And I think phase out is the right way to look at it. We all believe in greater competition at the local level for primary and secondary education. I believe in the long run, if we had robust competition, we would see that most public schools would be in no way, shape, or form prepared to compete with private sector schools, and they would phase out. No one's advocating that we shut down, all the public schools tomorrow at 5 o'clock. What we're saying is allow robust competition and let the best school win. It's just that I believe that in a fair fight, it would lead to the phase out of the public sector's role in education.
I think you're right. One of my daughters goes to a charter school, and most of the other schools can't compete with it. It is publicly funded, but it's run completely different. It's a classical education school. All right, number 8, reform police accountability. Well, my favorite part on this one, again, was law enforcement. Oh, wait, no. Federal law enforcement shall be eliminated. It's like, whoa, no
Well,
FBI.
Annette, I mean, after all, most of the stuff the FBI is involved with, to the extent to which it's criminal anyway, and not just poking around politically, right? But to the extent to which the FBI is involved in criminal activity, it's illegal in the states. You don't
Right,
need a federal agency to prosecute things that are illegal here in Virginia or where you are in Colorado. So I think the whole thing starts out slightly dopey. I'm okay with the FBI continuing to exist as a much smaller agency. I think I would sunset the FBI and start something fresh, whose responsibility was merely to provide a check on state agencies and local agencies. The one thing we want the federal government to do, and the one thing at which it's really bad, is protecting our civil liberties. And having a federal agency that would, be tasked with that would not necessarily be a bad thing.
right. Um, all right. Number 9, end discretionary military interventionism. And that's, maybe we can talk about Ukraine if we get any time again. I have some really big topics I want to talk about with you, but I
That's an
like that
important
one.
one,
Yes, it is.
both
Number,
ethically and empirically. So yeah, we
yes,
can come
it
back to
is.
that.
And
Whether
it
you
came,
look at our foreign policy as a matter of ethics or whether you look at it as a matter of efficacy, either way you look at it, you have to admit that the United States government's foreign policy is in the crapper.
yes, no question. And then number 10, another one I love, impose term limits. And you said no longer than 12 years for any federal elected representatives. And I like that. I've come down to that same number myself. 12 years has been something that I've also thought was right. That gives you 2 terms in the Senate and 4 terms or 6 terms in the House. And no one should have longer than that. I agree.
That's a
Well,
long time. And that
yes,
as libertarians, we've always believed and we've always said that term limits are sort of a bad idea because you should have the right to vote for whatever nincompoop you want, right? And you want to
right.
vote for the same
Mhm.
schmuck for 80 years in a row, have at it. But I have learned the hard way that the whole idea of incumbency has been so perverted, has been so abused to provide such an unfair advantage in the election process that it's not really a fair election process at all. The whole idea that someone would be in office and have access to so many advantages really undermines the whole democratic process. And so for this reason, I've come to the conclusion that term limits may be a bad idea from a libertarian point of view, but indeed it is a bad idea whose time has come.
Yes. It's one of those lesser of 2 evils that, it's not something we love, but it's better than what's going on right now. Because I've had the same debate with myself. For those of you that have just tuned in, I am talking with Mike Termott, who is the Libertarian presidential candidate. You can find his platform and Libertarian platform at goldnewdeal.org. All right, one thing I did not find in your platform, which is huge right now, and I have several libertarian friends, and they all kind of have a different take on this. But we have a really big deal with illegal immigration right now. And what is the Gold New Deal, or what is the Libertarian platform on our border or our borders?
In my view, we need to be able to say two things out loud at the same time. It's a combination, in my view, of three different problems, really. Number one, we need to be able to recognize that immigration, when it is done legally, is good for America. Immigration is one of those things that differentiates us from other modern democracies. It's good for us culturally. It is good for us economically. It's even good for us financially at the government level, as long as you don't do something stupid like give away free money. And of course, that's the second piece of the three parts. That's the second part, is that you've got to get rid of this welfare program that advantages the idea of coming across the border, whether legally or illegally, takes money away from people who are born in the United States and transfers it, and creates a weird incentive system to try to recruit people who are interested in free money, which of course is not what we want to do. The vast majority of people who want to come to the United States don't even want a handout. They want a job. And we need to change our labor laws so that people who come to the United States are sent to work right away. I would actually be more comfortable with a policy that said, I'm going to call you in 6 weeks and make sure you have a job, rather than a policy that says, we're not going to let you work, because you create a black market in labor when you tell people they're not allowed to work legally, and then they work for these, bottom of the barrel wages because they've got no leverage. This is what undermines the wage structure in the United States, not people working legally, but the black market itself. And the third part of the puzzle is real important. And that is, we need to recognize that illegal immigration is bad for America. And it's bad for America in a couple of different ways. I spent a couple of days down at the border, Arizona-Mexico border last year, and I came away frighteningly impressed by the extent to which we have a humanitarian crisis going on down there. Most people who come into the United States come in illegally. And most people who come in illegally come in with some form of human trafficker. There is either a gang on the other side or some other type of what people call coyotes. They're all too often handed over to someone on the American side using one of these telephone-based apps. You don't have any idea who you're being handed over to. And then in all too many cases, people, especially young people, wind up in situations of effectively indentured servitude, which is every bit as hellacious as your imagination would allow. This is not good for America. It is not good as a matter of foreign policy. It's not a good look. And most importantly, it is horrific policy for the people who are directly affected. We need to stop that. I believe we need to get control of the border to discourage and stop people from coming in illegally, and at the same time do a much better job of deploying the technology necessary to vet people in legally faster. This would also discourage people from coming in illegally. And this whole idea that it should take weeks, months, even years to vet someone in is silliness. It's just technological silliness. We need to get the systems in place to interface with other nations' systems, other nations' data, so that, sure, if there's a warrant for your arrest, we'll figure that out at the border, right? If you're on some sort of a list, we'll figure that out. But if you're not on a list, in my view, it should be presumptive that we would want you in the United States. And, let's be honest, Annette, if you and I were in Mexico, we would be doing everything possible to get into the United States. If you're out there south of the U.S. border and not considering coming to the United States, I would have to ask you, why not? And so I've got a real hard time punishing people or discriminating against certain groups of people who want to come to the United States when it's exactly what I would do myself.
Right. No, that's totally understandable. And I like your 3 points. If you were elected and you are your first day of office and you're tackling this, what are your first steps?
With regard to immigration,
yes,
the first steps would be to redeploy resources from the Defense Department in order to get the technology that we need at the border to vet people in more quickly, to get control of the border so that people don't come in illegally. And I would pressure the legislature to change our policy with regard to work, because right now it's governed by federal law, which I think is a real problem. But I would also stand down on this very dopey idea of repatriating people through the process of deportation, which is horrific for American culture. It's horrific for our economy. And it's just punishing people for doing exactly what any of the rest of us would have done. My own view is that people who have come into the United States in the past illegally, that is in no small part the fault of the federal government. If you're not stopping people from doing what it is you know damned well they're going to do, that's on you. This is a great place to live. It's the best culture and potentially the best economy in the world. People are naturally going to want to come here. So I do believe that it's a matter of redeploying certain resources. As you know, I'm no fan of federal resources at all. Mm-hmm. So I'm not talking about new resources. I'm talking about redeploying some. And the Defense Department is the number one place where I would look to pull assets and personnel, because it is a bloated Defense Department that we have, and one that we need to cut back for a variety of reasons anyway.
All right, great. I don't know if you'll agree with me, but I think one of the other biggest problems, if not the biggest problem that we face, is our soaring debt, our national debt. I don't know how we recover from this. So I'm just wondering if you have some wonderful ideas that if this were a perfect world and we had President Maat, what would you do, President Maat, Libertarian candidate for president?
Well, first of all, I agree with you wholeheartedly. The federal government of the United States is moving quite quickly toward bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is not the word that we would use, but it is headed toward a financial collapse. No one who pays attention to these things should be predicting that the federal government of the United States is likely to survive past the middle of this century. And the problem that I have with that is not so much that I would miss the government. I don't think any of us expect too much of any value out of the federal government now. The problem I have is the collapse of the federal government financially would likely take down the US dollar, which would plunge the whole world into a deep depression that would be hard to climb out of, because right now the dollar is the only worldwide reserve currency. The answer is that we need to cap spending by our government. All government spending is theft. In the Libertarian Party, we often say taxation is theft, which is, of course, true. But it is also true that other means of financing government expenditure is also theft. Whether government spending is financed by taxation or whether it's financed by creating more debt and passing that on to future generations, or whether that is financed through inflation, any way you look at it, it is theft, because there's a dollar that the government spends that we cannot in the private sector. So the answer is that we have to cap overall spending, not just merely cap taxation, not merely cap borrowing, not merely shutting down inflation. All three things we have to do. But the root evil of all those other three things is the rate at which we spend money. When I worked for the White House, I was in the Office of Management and Budget, and a big part of my job was enforcing what we called in those days budget control law, which we really don't have anymore. The idea was that we needed to make it more difficult for the legislature to spend money past certain levels. Otherwise, they would need super majorities to get anything done. And I recognize there's no such thing as a silver bullet here. Any law that humans make, humans can take down. But we need to make it extremely difficult for politicians to spend money. And I believe that politically, it is easier for politicians to live by an overall cap than it is for them to buy into capping particular programs. Nobody wants to be seen as, the man or woman who voted for cutting back on entitlements. Nobody wants to be seen as the person who voted against someone's favorite program in some particular state. But if there were an overall cap, then to the extent to which you failed to get your fiscal house in order, there would be a haircut given across the board. And while that might seem disruptive, and it would be easier politically than asking for particular programs to be adjudicated in the legislature with standalone votes.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I like that idea as well, because you're right. We don't have the political will to cut Social Security by a huge amount or Medicare by a huge amount, but that's what would have to happen. Obviously.
That is what has to happen. Entitlements is the big problem, as you know.
Yes, it is. And so it just has to happen. There's no way around it. You've put the fear of God in me when you talk about this country not surviving past mid-century, but I think you're absolutely right. So everyone in the whole country really just has to have a come to Jesus moment and say, look, do we want to survive, or do we want to have Social Security for a few more years? I'm personally planning on just working until I die, because it's not going to be there for me. It's slated to go bankrupt right at the time that I'm supposed to retire, and I wouldn't be counting on it anyway. But I think most people need to accept the fact that if you don't have a 401k or other private retirement funds, you're going to be working until you die. So just find something you love to do. So.
Well, that's well said. And with regard to Social Security, I think the right plan is to terminate immediately, bringing in more people who are already receiving money. That's fine. You can pay them out, or they can phase out. They can continue pulling their money out. People who are halfway, right? Whether you've already been paying in for 5 years or 25 years, you've got to find a way to pay those people out in some relatively fair manner so that you can sunset the entire system, lock, stock, and barrel. I don't like the idea of screwing people twice, asking them to pay into the system and then telling them, ciao, thanks for the good times. We're not going to give you even pennies on the dollar. I've got an ethical problem with that. Yes. But we do need to sunset the system.
We do. And we need to sunset this section here on our interview, because we are out of time. But I appreciate your coming on and sharing these great ideas that I hope will take root in the hearts of more people. So I'm finishing my discussion with Mike Termont, Libertarian presidential candidate, and you can find him at goldnewdeal.org. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Annette.
All right, as always, I'm going to end this segment with a news story from my favorite news site, the Babylon Bee. And this one is: China offers to send 100,000 soldiers to Taiwan to assist with earthquake cleanup. Beijing, in what the media hailed as an inspiring show of international diplomacy and compassion, China offered to send 100,000 soldiers to Taiwan to assist with earthquake cleanup. Following a devastating 7.4 magnitude earthquake, the Chinese government graciously reached out to Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen to inform her that China had 100,000 soldiers ready and waiting to enter the country to help with rescue efforts. "We are here for you," President Xi Jinping said in a statement. "We see that you are in a very weakened and vulnerable state following this unfortunate earthquake, and would like to extend an offer to send search and rescue force, including 100,000 highly trained military personnel, to help you clean up the mess. Don't mind the fact that they will be carrying fully automatic weapons and shouting angrily at civilians. These are only precautions." While Taiwanese authorities had not provided an immediate response to the offer, the Chinese government appeared to be taking the initiative to send help anyway. "No need to respond," Xi said. "We are already on our way. You will not be able to withstand the force of our earthquake cleanup assistance. Chinese authorities also clarified that heavily armed tanks would be delivering food, water, and some other items that would make a tremendous impact. At publishing time, the Chinese government stressed that their 100,000 cleanup soldiers would be staying in Taiwan for as long as necessary and probably even longer. Thank you for listening to Annette on America, where freedom lovers gather.